Picture this. It's 3 a.m. in Rome. The streets are empty, swept by a warm breeze off the Tiber. At the top of the Palatine Hill, a figure moves slowly, cloaked in a purple toga. His bare feet leave damp traces on the cold marble. He doesn't speak. He sings. The man's voice echoes through the silence like a dirge. An ancient Greek lament, learned in his youth. Tragic, heart-wrenching. No one dares interrupt. Because this man is Nero, Emperor of Rome. And what he's singing is the death of his own mother. But to understand this moment, we must go back, before the fire, before the madness. Before he became a monster, he was a child nobody really wanted. Born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, he came into a world of knives and whispers. His father, a cruel nobleman, once kicked a pregnant woman in the belly during a drunken feast. His own wife. That child survived. That child was Nero. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was descended from emperors, sister of Caligula, niece of Claudius. She was power incarnate, exiled, disgraced, humiliated, but she came back. When Claudius married Agrippina, she pushed her son toward the throne with a force that left bodies in her wake. One by one, rivals were eliminated, poisoned, exiled, or mysteriously vanished. In AD 54, the Emperor Claudius suddenly died. Historians say mushrooms were to blame, specifically poisoned ones. At 16, Nero becomes emperor, a boy in a palace of predators. And for a while, things are calm. He gives speeches about peace. He ends capital punishment. He funds the arts. Seneca, his tutor, guides him. Burrus commands the Praetorian Guard. And Agrippina? She rules from behind the curtain. But boys grow, and shadows lengthen. Nero begins to resent his mother's grip. She interrupts state meetings, corrects him in public, sits beside him on the imperial throne. And so, she must go. But a goddess doesn't die easily. First, he has her palace moved away from his. Then he cuts her staff, her guards, her access. Then comes the infamous boat, rigged to collapse mid-sea. She survives, swims ashore, bruised, furious, alive. So he sends soldiers. When they arrive, she bares her belly. "Strike here," she says. "That's where I carried the monster." And with that, the last woman who could control Nero is gone. And the boy becomes a god. What rules Rome now is no emperor. It's a spoiled child with infinite power. He craves applause, craves beauty. He turns the empire into a stage. He forces senators to watch his plays, locked in theaters for hours. No clapping, death. Falling asleep, death. Even the noblest patricians feign admiration for his harp solos and odes to lost Greek lovers. Then comes the fire. July 18th, AD 64. A wind rises through the narrow alleys of the Subura. Flames leap from house to house. Rome, built in wood and dreams, begins to burn. The blaze lasts 9 days. Some say Nero was miles away in Antium when it started. Others say he stood on a tower, lyre in hand, reciting Homer as his city turned to ash. What is true? History doesn't always care. What we know is this: Nero seized the moment. Where charred ruins once stood, he erected his dream. The Domus Aurea, the Golden House. A palace so grand it offended the gods. Mosaics of pearls, artificial lakes, rotating dining rooms, and ceilings that rained rose petals and perfume. Statues of Nero towering over Rome, casting long shadows across hungry ruins. The people murmured, and so Nero blamed someone else, the Christians, a new, strange sect, followers of a crucified man. They refused to worship Roman gods. They spoke of love, peace, and an invisible kingdom. Nero turned them into public enemies. They were nailed to crosses, burned alive, fed to beasts. Their screams echoed through the Colosseum as Nero watched from his private box, composing poetry about divine justice. But even blood has limits. Nero's personal life spirals further into madness. He kicks his pregnant wife Poppaea to death during an argument. Then, stricken with grief, he finds a young slave boy, Sporus. He has the boy castrated, dressed in Poppaea's clothes, and publicly marries him. He calls him Empress, calls it love. He builds golden statues of himself, orders priests to declare him divine, renames months in his honor. Rome begins to choke under the weight of his delusions. Revolts erupt in the provinces. The legions no longer cheer his name. The Senate, once his puppet, sharpens its knives. Even his closest allies, Seneca and Burrus, are gone. One poisoned, the other forced to die with dignity. In AD 68, the army revolts. The Senate declares Nero an enemy of the state. Even his Praetorian Guard abandons him. He flees, disguised, alone, terrified. In a villa outside the city, surrounded by a handful of freedmen, Nero receives the news. Soldiers are coming. He begs them to dig his grave, paces the room, weeping. And finally, with no courage left, he asks his servant to guide his hand. The blade enters. Nero dies at 30 years old. His final words? "What an artist dies in me." But death is not the end. The Roman people do not forget. Some mourn him, others celebrate. In the East, rumors spread. Nero lives. 3 impostors rise, claiming to be the dead emperor returned. The myth outlives the man. For centuries, Nero becomes the symbol of tyranny, a name cursed by poets and praised by madmen. In Dante's Inferno, he burns eternally in hell. In art, he plays the lyre while cities fall. But perhaps the real horror isn't Nero himself. It's the empire that allowed him to exist, the Senate that obeyed, the guards who killed at his word, the nobles who clapped when he sang, the artists who painted his lies in gold. Because Nero didn't destroy Rome. He revealed it, a city where blood bought applause, where cruelty wore a crown, where a boy could grow up believing he was a god, and no one dared say otherwise. Today, the statues of emperors still line the Via Sacra, marble faces frozen in pride, wisdom, or madness. But beneath their feet, in the dust and shadow, lie the echoes of songs once sung by the firelight. Songs of grief, of power, of fear. And if you listen closely, you can still hear Nero, not the emperor, not the monster, just the boy, singing to a mother he murdered, on a hill he once ruled, in a city that remembers and forgets. Subscribe for more unseen history, where shadows speak and the past still breathes.